U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, unexpectedly sealed off the entire Texas border after patrols discovered a collapsed tunnel near the Rio Grande. However, unlike previously uncovered tunnels used for smuggling or illegal immigration, FBI experts confirmed that this tunnel could connect to power plants, airports, or even U.S. groundwater sources. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could become a weapon capable of destroying critical infrastructure overnight. But the most shocking discovery lay deep inside. A room at the center contained detailed maps of major U.S. cities, along with satellite communication equipment bearing logos from Russia and China. The bigger question is, why did this underground tunnel system evade detection by America's most advanced tunnel scanning technology for over a decade? The discovery started with something simple: a patch of collapsed soil near the Rio Grande River. Border Patrol agents were used to small cave-ins caused by shifting earth or illegal digging. But this one felt different. When a team went in to check, they didn't find a shallow pit or a narrow crawl space. They found a steel-reinforced tunnel with lights still working. It was the entrance to something far bigger. The opening led to a hallway wide enough for two people to walk side by side. Concrete lined the walls. The ceiling had electric wiring, complete with breakers and labeled circuits. The floor showed signs of repeated foot traffic, not just once or twice, but likely hundreds of times over many years. As they went deeper, things got stranger. Side paths branched off into rooms, each with a specific purpose. One looked like a storage chamber, filled with empty crates, sealed boxes, and hand tools. Another had bunk beds and canned food stacked neatly on metal shelves. Medical kits were organized by date and function. But that was just the start. Several rooms featured high-end electronics, including routers, encrypted drives, and custom-built servers mounted on cooling racks. Some devices had logos scratched off. Others had labels in languages other than English. Nothing was connected to the internet, but the presence of satellite phones and antenna equipment suggested that someone had been communicating quietly, securely, and probably internationally. A different hallway led to a sealed chamber. What they found there stopped everyone cold. The room was sealed with an airlock-style door. Inside, there were temperature and pressure monitors still blinking. Two large containers sat in the middle, surrounded by biohazard markings and air filtration units. Experts later said it resembled a lab built for controlled chemical or biological tests. No active agents were found, but residue tests confirmed traces of lab-grade solvents and decontamination foam. At this point, the team realized this was no smuggling tunnel. This was infrastructure. Someone had invested time, knowledge, and resources into building a system that didn't just hide movement, it supported it. Blueprints recovered from one wall revealed how much had gone into construction. Each tunnel was reinforced to hold up under earthquakes. Every air vent was routed to blend in with natural erosion or old industrial zones above. Ventilation shafts were scattered across open fields, camouflaged with brush and debris. Even the drainage system was designed to redirect water silently back into the surrounding soil. No alarms, no sound. Just a silent machine running underground. A full map of the network has not been released to the public, but internal reports described it as multi-layered and expanding. The tunnels stretch for miles, with some sections possibly reaching across the border into Mexico. Others lead toward areas with critical infrastructure. The tunnel builders had studied the geography. Their work was not rushed. Sections were smooth, precise, and built with knowledge of how to avoid ground-penetrating radar. Chemical soil cooling was used to mask heat signatures from drones. Motion sensors were placed near choke points. Cameras faced inward, not outward, showing that the threat was internal, not from outside invasion. This system wasn't meant to smuggle drugs or people. It was meant to support operations. But the biggest question remained: how long had it been there? Preliminary analysis showed that parts of the tunnel had been operational for over a decade. Some sections had electrical hardware made before 2010. Others had more recent updates, including solar-powered battery packs with manufacturing dates from 2021. That meant it wasn't built all at once. It had been maintained and expanded. And someone had kept it running while the rest of the country lived above in total ignorance. When forensic teams checked data stored in the devices found on site, they uncovered timelines, logs, and operational updates written in code. After translated, many of them showed regular schedules, check-ins, maintenance entries, reports of movement completed and exits secured. Each log had a time and a signature. Whoever used this system wasn't guessing. They were trained and well-funded. It was clear this tunnel was not the end. It was only one part of something far more coordinated. Which leads us to the next question. How did the US government respond when it realized it had lost control of the ground beneath its feet? The discovery of the underground tunnel system forced the US government to act faster than it ever had before. Just hours after the first reports came in, federal agents locked down the entire area near the Rio Grande. Roads were blocked, border crossings were frozen, and airspace was restricted. No one in, no one out. The Department of Homeland Security issued a red-level alert across all southern border states. Within 48 hours, a federal emergency was declared. This wasn't just a border problem anymore. It was a national security threat. The FBI and the Department of Defense sent teams to investigate the site. Engineers from the U.S. Army Corps joined them to map out the structure. They weren't prepared for what they saw. To fully understand the scope of the tunnel, the military brought in drones equipped with thermal sensors and underground mapping systems. One of the key tools was the LAR mapping robot, designed to explore collapsed mine shafts and military bunkers. Another was the EM gradiometer, a device that detects hidden structures by measuring changes in electromagnetic fields. This technology, developed by the Air Force, had been used before in remote areas like Alaska and New Mexico, but it had never been tested on American soil during a crisis. As the robots moved deeper into the tunnels, the data became more disturbing. The maps showed multiple levels, branching tunnels, and sealed-off chambers. Some paths even reached beyond federal land, crossing under towns and private property. The military realized the system could not have been built in a few months. It had taken years, possibly more than a decade. The Department of Defense reviewed 15 years of satellite images, trying to pinpoint when the construction had begun. They noticed something strange. Several phases of the tunnel's growth matched moments when the country was distracted by natural disasters or political chaos. In 2012, the tunnels expanded during a hurricane on the Gulf Coast. In 2016, new branches appeared while national protests took over the news. This was no coincidence. Whoever built this system knew exactly when the country would be looking the other way. While the search continued underground, cybersecurity experts examined the data recovered from inside. Hard drives were encrypted. Some were blank, but others contained strange logs written in code. Each entry listed dates, locations, and asset numbers, words used in military or intelligence operations. This made the situation even more serious. The National Security Council was briefed behind closed doors. New rules were issued for how federal agencies would share information about underground threats. For the first time, U.S. intelligence began considering the idea that the country's enemies might not attack from above, but from below. The Department of Energy also got involved. Some tunnels had curved toward power plants and substations. If damaged, these could cut off electricity for entire cities. Officials feared that if they hadn't found the tunnel in time, it might have been used to launch a silent attack on American infrastructure. The government response was intense, but not without problems. Some officials blamed each other for not noticing the signs earlier. Others questioned whether more tunnels like this existed in other states. The public, however, knew very little. News of the shutdown spread fast, but most of the details were kept hidden. That secrecy only added to the fear. People wanted answers. But behind the scenes, one question kept coming up over and over again. Who had the power, money, and skill to build a secret fortress beneath the border, and why? Once the tunnel's size and purpose became clear, The focus shifted to the question no one could answer. Who had built it? The level of detail found inside suggested it wasn't the work of a single group. It looked more like a joint effort, combining military planning, advanced engineering, and intelligence operations. Investigators recovered piles of printed documents and handwritten notes from inside the sealed rooms. Some of them were written in Russian. Others used Mandarin, Arabic, or Spanish. Even more strange, many pages had code names and symbols used by known foreign intelligence networks. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became. This was not an amateur job. One room looked like a war room. It had maps of US military bases, airports, and power plants. Red lines connected major cities, with pins marking what seemed to be possible strike zones. Some of these locations matched real critical infrastructure sites across Texas and New Mexico. In another room, they found 3D printed models of government buildings and transport hubs. The models were precise, down to the number of floors and entry points. Officials believed they were used for practice, possibly for infiltration or sabotage. But the most disturbing evidence came from the coded files on the recovered hard drives. Some messages referred to training cycles, asset deployment, and rehearsals. These weren't just words. They were signs of coordination. Someone had turned this tunnel system into a base for planning real operations. The intelligence community started putting together profiles. They believed several players could be involved. One possibility was foreign governments. Russia and China had both been known to fund operations meant to gather information on US systems. The use of satellite gear with Chinese labels, plus encrypted logs in Cyrillic, made this theory more likely. But it didn't stop there. Another possibility was private military contractors, hired to build and secure the tunnel. These groups often operate in war zones and have access to high-grade equipment. They also know how to stay hidden. The final theory pointed to a shadow coalition. This would mean criminal networks, rogue engineers, and trained mercenaries working together for a shared goal. If true, it meant the threat was not from outside alone, but already inside the country. The tunnels showed signs of professional construction. Some of the concrete walls were reinforced with materials used in NATO military bunkers. The ventilation systems had silent motors designed for submarines. The wiring matched US industrial suppliers, which meant the materials were either stolen or bought under false identities. The pieces started to connect. A network like this needed money, manpower, and time. It also needed someone on the inside, someone who knew where to dig and how to hide it. Security agencies started checking federal construction records and contracts. They found anomalies. One contractor had signed off on terrain shifts years ago that, in hindsight, looked like the early signs of tunneling. That person had since disappeared. Other records were incomplete or missing. It became clear that the tunnel's existence had been hidden not only by design, but possibly by people in positions of power. Now the real question was how deep the cover-up went. How many knew and stayed silent? And more importantly, what were they preparing for? Because the more evidence investigators uncovered, the more it looked like this tunnel wasn't meant to stay secret forever. At some point, someone planned to use it. But for what? Could the next phase be already in motion? And would anyone notice before it was too late? The moment news broke about the shutdown of the Texas border, chaos followed. Truck drivers were the first to feel it. Lines stretched for miles, goods sat in containers without movement, and export companies had no answers. Within 24 hours, several $1 billion in trade were frozen. What was once a busy flow of trucks and workers had turned into a standstill. Local businesses in cities like Laredo and Eagle Pass began shutting their doors. Restaurants lost supplies. Warehouses are filled. And across the river, in Mexican border towns, factories paused production with no way to ship their products. Economists warned that if the shutdown continued for more than a week, both countries would suffer long-term damage. But trade wasn't the only concern. In nearby neighborhoods, fear began to grow. People didn't know what the tunnel was or who had built it. All they knew was that the government wasn't saying much. That silence made everything worse. Rumors spread fast, faster than facts. Some claimed nuclear weapons had been found. Others said alien technology had been hidden beneath the border for decades. Videos of helicopters flying low and military trucks parking outside small towns went viral. Without real information, people filled the gaps with fear. Stores ran out of bottled water. Guns and ammunition sold out in record time. In Del Rio, residents began forming local watch groups. They patrolled quiet roads, checked parked vehicles, and even questioned strangers. No one trusted anyone anymore. Officials tried to calm the panic, but it was too late. People had seen the images. Grainy photos of sealed rooms, strange equipment, and coded maps had leaked online. Social media made the situation worse by pushing the most extreme theories to the top of everyone's feed. Meanwhile, political pressure exploded in Washington. Congress held emergency hearings. The Secretary of Homeland Security was grilled on live TV. Lawmakers from both parties blamed each other for failing to protect the country. Some demanded new technology for underground surveillance. Others questioned why the tunnel wasn't discovered years ago. No one had a clear answer. The truth was, this kind of threat had never been considered before. All national security policies had focused on threats from above, such as missiles, planes, drones, and hackers. No one imagined that the real danger could be buried below their feet. This wasn't just a wake-up call. It was an embarrassment. For every expert who spoke in public, dozens more worked in secret. They knew this wasn't over. The discovery of a tunnel raised a terrifying possibility. There could be more. And not just in Texas. Suddenly, the entire southern border from California to Florida was seen as vulnerable. In Arizona, local police started checking old sinkholes and abandoned buildings. In New Mexico, geologists were asked to review land shifts from the past 10 years. Even areas far from the border began to worry. What if one of the branches reached under a major airport? What if a tunnel ran beneath a dam or nuclear plant? Nothing could be ruled out anymore. The Department of Energy launched its inspection program. They reviewed every power facility in the region. Some plants even shut down for temporary inspections. Airports ran drills simulating tunnel-based attacks. It felt like the country was bracing for something worse. But while the government scrambled for answers, regular people were left in the dark. News networks played the same old footage, offering little more than speculation. The few officials who spoke gave carefully worded statements, avoiding real details. That silence created space for conspiracy. And in that space, fear grew. At the same time, a new concern began to surface. What if the tunnel wasn't meant for attack? What if it were a backup system? A place to hide people or objects if something went wrong above ground. Some experts said the structure had features seen in doomsday bunkers. Sealed doors, filtered air, medical stations, it was all too perfect. If the tunnel was built to protect, then what exactly were they preparing for? This mystery took the crisis to a new level. It wasn't just about who built it or how. It became a question of purpose. Because if the system was still active, then whoever had made it might still be out there, watching, waiting, or even planning something worse. So what happens next? If this tunnel wasn't the end, but just the beginning, where does the trail lead from here? The discovery of the Texas tunnel was terrifying on its own, but it raised an even more dangerous possibility. What if this wasn't the only one? Experts from the Department of Homeland Security warned that the tunnel system was too advanced to be a single test project. It had multiple exits, reinforced paths, and signs of careful expansion over time. That kind of planning suggested replication. The deeper investigators looked, the more likely it seemed that similar tunnels could exist in other places. Sensors placed along the southern border began detecting strange underground patterns. Some of them matched the layout of the Texas system. Others were incomplete but still raised concern. In Arizona, seismic data showed unnatural vibrations beneath a region with no known construction. In New Mexico, drones picked up signs of collapsed soil near a power station. Nothing was confirmed, but the patterns were there. This turned the crisis from a regional event into a national threat. scientists joined the effort. They focused on one area in particular, the Ogallala Aquifer. This massive underground water reserve supports farms, towns, and cities across 8 U.S. states. Some tunnels from Texas appeared to point directly toward this aquifer. If damaged, the consequences would be massive. A chemical leak could poison drinking water for millions of people. A collapse could lower the water table, drying out farmland and damaging crops. The risk wasn't just about security anymore. It was environmental, agricultural, and even biological. For decades, the Ogallala Aquifer had been slowly shrinking due to overuse. Now, the fear was that it might also be vulnerable to sabotage. Geologists found signs that someone had drilled near sensitive underground zones. The evidence was subtle, just shifts in soil pressure and small changes in mineral levels. But when placed on the map, those shifts aligned with potential tunnel paths. That wasn't the only concern. Satellite images showed that the construction of the tunnels often increased during major public distractions. When the country focused on hurricanes, political protests, or foreign wars, the builders seemed to take advantage. This pattern suggested a long-term strategy. Whoever planned this knew how to stay invisible. And now, their network might be touching systems that keep the entire country running. Water, power, transportation, all connected by what lies beneath. The Pentagon called it a new form of threat: subterranean insurgency. This wasn't a battle fought with soldiers and tanks. It was one built with drills, maps, and silence. In military history, tunnels have been used for surprise attacks, secret escapes, and deep cover missions. But never on U.S. soil. Not like this. Not with this level of technology and coordination. Training manuals were updated. New drills were created for airport and power plant staff. But fear remained. What if someone was still using the tunnels? What if this was more than preparation, and the next step was already in motion? Private security companies began scanning for abnormal vibrations in other states. Some schools and hospitals were ordered to inspect their basements and foundations. In one case, a school in Southern California reported strange readings under a gym. The area was sealed off and the investigation is still ongoing. None of this made it to national news. The public only saw the border closure. They didn't hear about the silent push to find the next tunnel before it became too late. Officials feared panic. They believed that exposing the full scale of the problem would cause more harm than good. But silence has a cost. And the longer they wait, the more time this network has to grow. Because if even one more tunnel exists, just one, then the risk has already doubled. And if it leads to another critical site like a water reserve or power station, the damage could be impossible to control. So the real question becomes clear. If the danger is still underground, how long before it finally surfaces? The discovery of the secret tunnel network beneath the Texas border has exposed a grave threat to national security. This was no ordinary smuggling passage, but a sophisticated underground system equipped with satellite technology, detailed maps of critical infrastructure, and evidence linking it to foreign intelligence operations. The tunnel's advanced design, including radar-evading construction and climate-controlled chambers, suggests years of covert planning. Disturbingly, its expansion coincided with moments of national distraction, indicating a deliberate strategy to avoid detection. Authorities now fear this may be just one node in a larger, undetected network. Yet this crisis has also revealed America's resilience. The rapid mobilization of federal agencies, cutting-edge detection technology, and cross-departmental collaboration demonstrate the nation's capacity to confront emerging threats. While the tunnel's existence is alarming, it serves as a crucial wake-up call, prompting smarter surveillance, stronger defenses, and renewed vigilance against unconventional dangers.